Hello and welcome back to First Act, a podcast from Koshy's Business Builders. I'm Cess Busby.
And I'm Adam Bubb.
And in case it's your first time with First Act, Adam and I are both experienced editors who interview small business owners, CEOs and thought leaders every day. And we learn so much from these different life experiences. It's the reason that we love doing this podcast.
Well, I just love hanging out with you here in this very small studio, Cess Busby. We've done about 20 plus episodes together so far, First Act, and we've got so much more to come this season. If you're enjoying it as much as we are, pop a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening right now. Now, First Act is all about the origin stories of fascinating founders. Who's in the hot seat today, Cess?
Ooh, Justus Hammer is the man behind a business that was, for quite a few years now, has had the reputation as being the Airbnb for pets. Justus is the founder of Australia's largest online pet care platform, Mad Paws, which connects dog and cat owners across Australia with trusted, vetted pet sitters. Now, since launching in 2014, Mad Paws has grown to have more than 15,000 pet sitters and a few sub-businesses too, like its Mad Paws Dinner Bowl, which is a pet food subscription service. This seasoned entrepreneur has a lot more than raw pet food in his fascinating backstory. He's passionate about marketing and startups, having founded Australia's largest group buying company, Spreets, in 2011 and investing in more than 10 startups in Australia and overseas. Justus Hammer, we're excited to hear your first act. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Justus, we are excited to chat with you today, and thank you very much for finding there's a bit of a behind-the-scenes backstory here of a couple of meeting rooms that you had to go through at Mad Paws. But thank you for finding one where you could chat. I mean, it's the reality of office when we are in the office nowadays. We always start with our First Act icebreaker. Your icebreaker for today is, what breed of dog or cat best describes your personality?
Wow, that's a tough one. I would probably say maybe a cavoodle. I mean, this is also because we've got a cavoodle in the family, but they like to investigate. They learn pretty quickly. I hope I learn pretty quickly, and they're also quite cheeky. Maybe that's a good characterization.
A cheeky cavoodle. That's right. Well, I think you better live up to that in this conversation. We will be the judge of this.
Puts a lot of pressure on me now, I guess.
Now he's wishing he said Great Dane.
I was thinking maybe the sausage dog. Maybe the sausage dog would have been a good choice as well, you know, because I'm German, so and they are my favorite breed, pretty much. But yeah.
Well, we won't do any.
We'll stick with a couple.
We won't do any stereotyping there. Now, on that note, let's start with young Justus. You grew up in Germany, so tell us about your upbringing. What was that like?
So I grew up in Munich, and I was not your typical kind of, I guess, entrepreneur that was selling orange juice in your front yard. I was very sports kind of oriented, so I didn't like school much. I loved sports. I started playing soccer, as you have to when you grow up in Germany, and particularly in Munich with FC Bayern Munich, obviously there. But then kind of grew pretty quickly to what I'm now, 6'6", and figured out that basketball was probably a better sport for me. So started playing basketball when I was 15, and for quite a while I thought that's going to be my career. Played a little bit of professional basketball when I was going at 19, 20, and then figured out that that's not going to be, it for the rest of my life. But kind of stuck with basketball for a long period of time. Kind of got into coaching quite a bit, and still played like second, third league in Germany for a while. Financed my study with that, and it's kind of one of my big passions is sports. And so that was really kind of where it all started. I did university, but that was really just me following one of my best friends because I had no idea what I'm going to study, and he ended up studying macroeconomics, and I had no idea what that is, but I still signed up for it, and it turned out to be quite good for me. because one of the things I was always good in math. That's a very math-driven study in Germany. Yeah, I actually enjoyed that more than school. From there, I kind of then figured out at some stage I have to get a job, and that's when my journey in startups, I guess, started. Because very very quickly I kind of figured out that going into a corporate is probably not what's going to drive me or what I'd enjoy. So I started working for a kind of startup in Germany that was in the online space, and that's where I put kind of my feelers into kind of online marketing for the first time.
Yeah, so was that the moment that you really connected with marketing and you could see that there might be a possible career path there for you?
Yeah, so that took a little while, I think, because, like I said, I came kind of from the macroeconomic side. I was the first company I worked with. I was actually working more on the kind of legal side. It was the whole time where the deregulation happened in Germany. So I was kind of in that space. But why I actually ended up in marketing was I was good in Excel, and that was the time that Google was kind of becoming big, and the marketing people in the office kind of realized that I'm good in Excel, and they had to do a lot of stuff in Excel to kind of do optimizations and so forth. Weren't as nice tools out there as they are today, and that's kind of how I fell into marketing. If you would have asked me when I was 20, 21, 22, if I'd want to do marketing, I definitely would have said no, because marketing for me was always associated with, your kind of big brand, creative type of marketing, which certainly is not my strong suit. But then once I kind of realized that there's actually a huge part of marketing now growing in this whole kind of performance side, data-driven kind of marketing, that's when it kind of piqued my interest.
So what brought you from Munich to Sydney?
I think it was about 27, 28. And my girlfriend at the time then finished university, and it was kind of the time where we thought, okay, there's a chance now where we can still get away before we kind of settle in Germany. And one of my best friends was here in Sydney, at the University of Sydney, actually, doing his master's here. And he said, hey, I think you're going to love it down here. And that was kind of all we needed. We wanted to go somewhere where it's warm. We didn't want to go to the States. And so kind of Australia was right there for the taking. Came here, and I think after 6 or 8 weeks, I've never looked back and just tried to find a way to stay.
What differences would you say you noticed between how Germans like to work versus how Australians like to work?
Yeah, it's a good point. I've thought about this quite a bit. There's quite a few differences, I think. And it depends always also on your life stage. I think, I'm probably seeing things quite differently now than when I was back in Germany. And I only worked in Germany really for like 3-4 years, right? But so I think there's some of the typical things you say about Germans that are probably true. I think they're quite hardworking. Not saying that Australians are not hardworking, but I think there's definitely a kind of level of detail that you find in Germany that's harder to get in Australia. And I think that was kind of one of the advantages I had maybe here. So I think Germans in general are quite detail orientated and quite structured, obviously. Now, I'm probably not your typical German, so I'm probably not the most structured German you'd find out there. But I definitely feel like that's kind of one of the differences when I came from Germany to here, on kind of learning how that works. And then obviously it's a lot more casual, I'd say, in Australia, and depends on what areas you work in. But just starting from in Germany, everything starts with your last name, right? Like if you work in a company, most of the time, if you don't know somebody on a day-to-day basis, you talk to them, talking to them in the last name. That's how you address them. When in Australia, it's unheard of.
And I guess your love of sports would also make you fit in quite well here in Australia. Was that part of your attraction of the lifestyle too? Like being able to get out in the grey outdoors and to be able to have it lead a kind of very physical lifestyle too?
Yeah, 100%. So, first of all, the weather is obviously, significantly better than in Germany. Even though every time I go back to Germany, it seems to be the 2 weeks where it's beautiful weather over there. And you tend to forget kind of how miserable it is sometimes in winter.
You choose your times wisely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's beautiful in Germany, especially when the weather is great. It's a great place to be. But yeah, I think that I love love being outdoors. I've kind of picked up golf now that I'm old and can't play basketball as good as I want to anymore. So yeah, it definitely was a big part for me on what attracted me to kind of staying here.
Now, you always seem to be ahead of the curve with your innovative technology ideas. Can we take a look back at one of the first ones, which was the idea for Spreets? How did you land on that?
Yeah, Spreets was really, one of those ones where we just saw an opportunity. We saw it working somewhere else, and it was very much an executional play on making sure that you can make it work here in Australia. So back in the days when I was thinking about kind of starting Spreets or starting a company in that space, I was working at GetPrice, which was a shopping comparison site, and I talked to through like one of my mentors, who was the CEO of GetPrice back then. He kind of introduced me to quite a few entrepreneurs here in Sydney, which really helped me to kind of start thinking about opportunities and what I'd want to do, because I was at that crossroads of either doing something myself or actually staying in marketing and going to a bigger company. I actually signed a contract with Google back then to start working at Google. And only kind of in the last minute, literally the day before I was supposed to start at Google, on Sunday, I gave them a call and said, I'm not coming in. I'm starting a company, which, they thought I'm crazy. But, and I thought I'm crazy because it was a tough decision, back then. But it was kind of one of those ones where I felt, it was the right thing for me to do, because we saw the opportunity and how quickly Groupon grew in the US. And the downside for me was fairly small, right? I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have a family and big bills to pay. So the downside for me was like, okay, if this doesn't work, I'm still probably going to learn more than anywhere else, and I can still go back to Google if I need to. So that made kind of my decision back then a little bit easier. But yeah, that one was really about spotting an opportunity overseas, kind of looking at the market here and trying to figure out whether this would work here, and then about executing better than anybody else. And I think, it's always, I think in startup land, there's a lot of what's the right word? Kind of after the fact, making up stories on kind of how brilliant somebody was and kind of picking up something.
Mythologizing.
A big chunk of that just being there at the right time at the right space, right? And so I think we were lucky at that we picked the right space at the right time, and then I think what we were good at was in executing that better than anybody else, and becoming the number one in the kind of group buying space very, very quickly.
Yeah, you were able to spot the opportunity at the right time, which is sometimes 75% of success, I think, just being able to spot what's coming.
100%.
But
that's, a lot of time that's also driven by luck, right? I mean, you can pat yourself on the back and say you've looked at everything and kind of made the right call, but sometimes it's also just I've been wrong as well, right, on opportunities, and sometimes it just doesn't play out the way you think it will.
Nonetheless, luck aside, the success of Spreets has been really well documented. You grew it to 1.5 million members and then more than 100 staff in less than a year. And then you sold Spreets on to Yahoo 7 for 40 million after just 10 months. Now, what steps did you take to beef up the brand in that time to be able to get it valued at such a high price so quickly?
So I think a couple of things came together that kind of worked well. And those, like the key things for us, again, was kind of all about execution, right? So we knew that is a model that you have to drive very quickly and very hard from a marketing perspective. So we were not shy on spending money, and we also had the right investors to kind of push us that way, right? So if we would have not had the right investors, and we would have had maybe more conservative investors, they would have been maybe more concerned about kind of our runway and how long we can kind of survive at that spend. they were more pushing us to spend harder and grow the company faster, because it was a very competitive space, right? We had, I think at some stage we counted 81 competitors in that space, right? Because everyone who had a database at some stage thought, okay, why don't I do a group buying site, right? And, fortunately it wasn't as easy as that. But I think that was, so being very aggressive in that execution, kind of really, really putting all our chips on the table to grow it quickly, and on the other end also being probably a bit ahead of the curve in terms of how we ran our performance marketing side of things. So even back then we were already we were able to tell you kind of on a single customer base kind of when did they join, how much did we spend on them, and what time, how long did it take us to make them profitable. Now that's pretty standard kind of procedure for now, but back then it was quite ahead of our times, and I think that allowed us to also be more aggressive in how we spend our marketing than some of our competitors.
So we're talking about a period that was only 10 years ago, and how much that has changed in performance marketing, and what you're saying now about the depth of data that we're dealing with, brands are dealing with on a daily basis, and it's just baked into a lot of business models now. So you build up this business, you build up Spreets, sell it to then Yahoo 7 for 40 million. I mean, it sounds like a dream come true. Most people would be like, I'll take the 40 million and go live on an island. But you've been extremely active in business since then. Why is that?
Well, I mean, the first reason is that I didn't quite get the whole 40, right?
That's the juicy stuff we want to know.
I had a co-founder and so forth, right? So this breaks it down a bit more. By today's standard, I probably couldn't buy a house from that in Sydney anymore. But yeah, I think the other thing you learn quite quickly, and that's something I've kind of had to learn over the years as well. It's not about making a amount of money at some stage, right? Because I think if you think about the pleasure you get from working, or the enjoyment you get from something, is not about making a amount of money. I mean, this is kind of an end point, and that's great. But if you don't kind of find ways and kind of enjoying the journey, it's a pretty sad existence, right? So I think that's something I learned certainly after that, because I was like, oh, yep, there's a chunk of money, great. But I was already, and luckily, I was already involved in a couple of businesses like Airtasker, for example, quite early as an investor and mentor, and a couple of other businesses that we started or tried then, to still be involved in businesses and kind of enjoy kind of growing them. And so that's what I've kind of focused on since then.
Can I ask, just going back to Spreets for a second though, was there always an exit plan? Like, did you build it knowing you were going to sell it?
Yes. So I'd say Spreets probably one of the few businesses we've done where it was very clearly defined and kind of what we'd want to do. Because we've seen the kind of massive growth in the US, and we knew there were a couple of parties in Australia that might be interested in this space, to tag that onto their existing business. We always thought that's the kind of benefit of being the number one and growing it the fastest. You probably get a premium on the exit if you're number one, because selling number one is always much easier than selling 2, 3, or 4, and you get a better price for it, right? So, and I think again that timing kind of worked out perfectly for us. Absolutely, from kind of the beginning that we started Spreets, it was built with an intent to sell it.
So we've talked a bit about that being, that's a major success, but you also alluded to the fact you've had ideas that were not the right time or right place, ones that you so-called got wrong, but we learn from these things. What are some ideas? Like, do you have any examples of that you can share?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the latest one was probably sellable. So I was always quite interested in the kind of real estate space, and kind of learn a little bit more on kind of how we could potentially build a model that is more efficient, and really kind of solve some of the issues in the market. And so we started Sellable in 2015, I think, or 16. And this was very much focused about giving you money for your house, essentially in 7 days, right? So how the model worked was you'd come to us and say, I want to sell my house. We would look at it. We'd run a automated valuation on it. We'd physically look at the house. And then within 7 days, we'd say, okay, cool, we'll give you $1 million for it. So very quick kind of turnaround rather than your kind of traditional real estate transaction. And all kinds of details come into that. But I think where we got this wrong was this model actually now works in some other countries particularly well. For example, in Spain, Italy, some of the markets where the real estate market's not as sophisticated as here in Australia. And so I think what we underestimated then was that the real estate market for Australia is already high sophistication. Everyone in Australia is pretty much a real estate investor, right? I mean, you can't go to a dinner party or something and not talk about real estate. And everyone knows what the house is worth, right? Because there's like 10 tools online you can have a look at, and everyone kind of tracks it against their neighbor. And, I've got my pool is 2 meters longer, and that's why it's worth $100,000 more. That's kind of very kind of common conversations in Australia, where you go to Italy, for example, and ask somebody what their house is worth there. They wouldn't know unless they really look at selling it, right? Because they live in their house and that's their home. So I think we kind of really underestimated that sophistication and what that means for a model like this. So even though I think we've transacted 44, 45 properties at that time, and then timing, also bad timing. COVID hit exactly when we were trying to do a bigger cap raise. And that obviously put the whole real estate world into overdrive for a couple of months, where people thought prices are going to drop, and we couldn't raise the money. So that was definitely a learning on where we got the timing perfectly right for Spreets. We probably got the timing and the market slightly wrong for that model.
So if you parked it, will it resuscitate, do you think? Is there ever a time that the Australian property market will be ready?
So, well, I think because we got the market wrong slightly as well, I think we only do that with a changed model, right? To actually address the market here a little bit better than what we tried to do with the original model. So we're never going to try that model again here in Australia, at least not us. There's a couple of other companies that do great work on this, like Own Home, for example, that are more focused on the affordability side of the market, which is a big problem here, right? Like for a lot of kind of younger people, it's really hard to get into the real estate market. And how can you solve that issue? I think that's a much bigger problem to kind of look at and solve potentially.
We'll be back with more from Justus Hammer, and we'll hear more about Mad Paws after this short break.
So, Justus, let's jump forward to Mad Paws. Have you always been passionate about animals?
Yeah, I grew up with animals, and we had a dog in the family when we grew up, and I've always been in love with dogs. Now, I haven't had dogs in Australia up until now. Luckily, my wife family's got a dog, and we've got that dog quite a bit. We had two kids in the last 3 years, but the new dog is definitely on the horizon. And I think once our little one, who's just 2 months old now, is getting a little bit easier and lets us sleep from time to time, we'll go back to no sleep. Sleepless night or more sleepless nights with a puppy very soon.
Another cheeky cavoodle.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask my wife, probably not. She wants maybe something a little bit bigger, like a Labrador or a Groodle actually. But something in that space. I mean, we're in Bondi as well, so we're probably not going to get around not having something Oodle. Seems to be a must.
Well played. Yes, you won't be able to be a card-carrying member of the Bondi community without
Yeah,
some kind of oodle.
that's right.
Now, you founded Mad Paws with Alexei Soulopoulos. How did the two of you meet, and when did you realise that you would make good business partners?
Yeah, so actually, so there's two other founders that were in the business as well. One of them is our chairman now, Jan Packes, and the other one is now back in Germany. But we kind of all were looking at this as an opportunity because we're kind of very close to pets. Jan is an absolute pet lover. We have a lot of conversations about who takes the number one position in his family, whether it's his dog or his daughter. It's very equal footing. But we kind of looked at those opportunities, and then Jan and luckily we were also talking to Alexis, who we got to know through Jan's association in his university. So Alexis was running kind of the expat program from memory, and that's how we met. And so at that time, it was kind of the perfect match because Alexis was this kind of young, hungry entrepreneur who's kind of looking to really get his teeth into something, and we were looking for somebody to help us to really drive the business. And so I think that was kind of the perfect match, and it turned out to be the perfect match because Alexis done an awesome job for the first couple of years, kind of operationally driving the business, where we kind of helped to fund the business and help them from a strategy perspective.
We've heard on this podcast, we've heard a lot of origin stories, those aha moments, where the inspiration, like where just something clicked. We've heard it happen on Mexican beaches and all that kind of the glamorous stories. But was there a story like that for Mad Paws? Was there an aha moment where one of you said to the other, "What about this?"
Yeah, so we actually had a big aha moment, and for myself as well, when we did our first kind of consumer research. So we essentially just, because we knew we wanted to do something in the pet space, and we knew some of the issues that come with that, right? In terms of not want to go to a kennel and so forth. But when we invited a couple of dog lovers, and we had like 4 or 5 in the room, and the amount of love that they had for those pets and the amount of passion that they had for the idea of not having to go to a kennel, or them telling us that they're not going on holidays because they feel like they don't have somebody to look after those pets. That was really kind of when it's like, okay, shit, there's actually a big opportunity here to do something. And went to one of them had, and this was early days, right? One of them had their own Facebook page for their pet, right? So this is really when we were like, okay, there's a big opportunity here to really solve a key customer issue rather than just trying to build something on top that nobody needs.
Was that key to validating the idea for the business, like getting out into the pet owning community and talking to people? Like, did you go out to parks and chat to the people walking their dogs? Or
absolutely, I think it's always like that, right? I think the second you kind of go out and talk to more people, you've got a good chance to find out whether you're on the right track or not. The biggest mistake I think you can do is kind of being in a little apartment and trying to perfect your idea without talking to anyone. We've learned that pretty early, and we've always done that for pretty much all our businesses. Doesn't mean that we get it right, obviously, all the time, but it helped us to really kind of verify that there's something there. And we also thought, there's a big opportunity in the pet space in Australia where everyone was kind of back then already focused on retail. So Pet Circle had already started, and we obviously had Pet Barn and a couple of big retailers kind of dominating that kind of retail space, but nobody was looking at more from an experience space and a services space. So it just seemed like there's really a huge opportunity there to build a bigger brand that comes from the services side and kind of dominates that kind of pet services side, and then potentially add additional revenue streams to it later, which over the last kind of couple of years actually happened.
So I'd like to know, like, when we talk about, it is pet sitting as a service. How do you vet the people that are pet sitters that are going to be, playing such a role in caring for dogs and cats? And like you said, there's such an emotional connection there. It's almost like there's a bit of matchmaking going on there, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, that whole services business is really about matchmaking, right? And we've learned a lot, I guess, throughout the years on how we have to make that happen. Being a kind of hyper-local services marketplace, the whole kind of marketplace and how you grow a marketplace is even more true for us than for like a online product marketplace, for example. We really had to focus on building both sides of the marketplace up at the same time, right? So it means you need enough sitters in a particular area, and you need enough owners in a particular area that have demand for the service, right? Because otherwise, you get sitters on the platform, and if you don't have owners, they get disengaged and they leave the platform and don't want to work with you. On the other side, obviously, if you're an owner and you don't find a sitter, it's a really bad experience, and you leave the platform as well. So you kind of have to build it geographically with liquidity in the marketplace and building that up. So that was the first thing we learned, which meant at the beginning we kind of put any sitter that wanted to come onto the platform onto Mad Paws, but then very quickly kind of learned that we'd have to be a lot more stringent in kind of understanding kind of who they are, how can we vet them, and then how do we match the right sitter with the right owner, right? And so that's been a journey that we're still working on. Now it's, we're getting a lot better. We've got a data scientist now that looks at this. We've got a data engineer that works on our search algorithm. But it really kind of started from us manually trying to figure this out. And like any good marketplace, we were sitting there at the beginning, kind of manually matching people. And, if we couldn't find a sitter, we'd jump on the phone and call people to find a sitter, right? That's kind of how it all starts. But to go back to your vetting question, it's now very much a online vetting process that you go through with a training program. And then we use data to identify kind of what type of sitter you are. Are you doing a good job? And if you're not doing a good job, we'll also kick you off the platform very quickly. So we've been, a lot more ruthless with this. I think you mentioned we have 15,000. We've actually got over 30,000, I think nearly 35,000 sitters on the platform now.
Wow.
And we've become a lot more ruthless in kind of who we keep up, who's doing a good job and providing great services versus, if you're not, we're happy to take you off the platform as well.
Wow. So Mad Paws, look, it began with pet sitting, and pet sitting is that is the core, the pet sitting service, boarding and all that sort of thing. But it's evolved to encompass far more than that. Was the plan always to scale into other areas of pet needs? I see you have insurance, you've got dinner bowl service.
Yeah, so we've actually looked at kind of one of our first pitch decks back in the day, and even then we were talking about this, right? So the idea was always to, and this was our focus for the first couple of years, and it obviously took us a little bit longer than we thought it would, but we wanted to make sure we're number one marketplace in Australia, right? Again, kind of focusing on being the number one. Normally comes with a premium, so you'd rather be the number one than being two or three, particularly in a marketplace scenario. So that was the first focus point for us. And only kind of once we achieved that, then I think it was the right time for us to look at how do we now use the incredible number of customers and the customer base that we've built up. How can we use that now to put other premium offerings in front of our customers? And kind of expand these service and product offerings that we have for our customers.
Obviously, adding all those additional services comes at a cost. So you did get outside investors, and Qantas was one of those early investors in Mad Paws. So how did that come about, and why was Qantas such a great alignment for the business?
Yeah, Qantas was really an awesome partnership early on in the business, and again, I think the timing was on our side here. Again, Qantas was at that stage had a venture arm for a while where they kind of looked at adjacent businesses and kind of how they can invest into and obviously accelerate some of their investments with the huge kind of, customer base that they have. And for us, the fit was perfect for the marketplace, right? Because when do you need a pet sitter? I mean, normally when you go on holidays, who do you use when you go on holidays? Qantas when you fly somewhere. So that kind of fit was perfect for us. Not just from a customer acquisition point of view, but also from a trust perspective, right? Qantas is probably one of the most trusted brands in Australia, even though they've gone through a bit of a tough patch, I guess, in the last couple of weeks. But that association for us as a marketplace was like super valuable because, particular market services marketplace is very much built around trust. An owner only is going to trust us with their little baby who's really kind of part of the family now. They trust us that we're going to do a good job about it. And so having a brand like Qantas on the platform that helped us really to kind of gain that trust with our customers. And so for us, it was kind of it was good from like two sides, right? One is pure customer acquisition. So really talking to people, and we're still integrated into the Qantas flow. When you book a flight, it asks you, do you need a pet sitter? So that's the one side we're kind of acquiring customers, but the other one was really about building that trust, which helped us hugely in building the marketplace to the size where it is now.
I'm sure a lot of people who are listening are pet owners, and maybe listening with a dog running around right now, or a cat sitting on the couch with them. So, I mean, I think it's incredible to have a service like that. Anything where, I mean, especially over the past couple of years, I would say that COVID has probably been a major opportunity. Well, I mean, I suppose at that time people were not traveling, so that would have been quite difficult. But now, coming out of COVID, a lot of people are traveling, and everyone is. I know for a fact that from people I know are looking to go away over the Christmas period, and that kennels are full. Pet sitters are such an important service for people now. What's that journey been like from COVID to now?
It was a crazy one, to say the least, because, like you rightfully said, it went from a huge shock for us at the beginning of COVID. I still remember kind of the board meetings we had back then, where at the beginning we were like, oh yeah, is this going to be bad? And we were like, oh, probably not that bad. And 2 weeks later, we lost pretty much 85% of our revenue because everyone was locked up at home. Nobody could travel. So, it's a huge impact for us as a business. And kind of going through that, we made a couple of decisions, and I hope we made the right ones. But it was the decision between shutting down or putting the business into hibernation. Letting go of all the great staff that we've built up over the last couple of years, and then ride out COVID until travel will come back, and then come back out of hibernation. And we decided against that, and we decided to do the opposite, which was like, no, we want to keep the staff because that's 90% of the business and why it works, and we want to use the staff to actually build now the new revenue streams that we've always talked about. And so that was the time when we started Dinner Bowl, and we internally kind of build up Dinner Bowl within, I think from first idea to shipping the first box was somewhere just over 2 months. And that really kind of saved us in a way, right? Because it meant that we could keep the staff, and the staff was amazing at that time as well. That we, all of them took pay cuts to kind of get through that time, and then we ramped it back up once the business kind of slowly came back. So they were extremely supportive and really wanted to stay with the business as well. And we used kind of all that energy to kind of build that new part of the business. Because of that, we had the opportunity then to take the upside out of COVID, which was the realization after 2-3 months that everyone around us was buying pets. There's 25% more cats out there now, and over 20% more dogs out there in the 18 months of COVID from before and after. So that's obviously a huge opportunity, and travel will come back. We figured out at some stage. So because we kind of made the bet on staying alive and doubling down on the business, adding additional revenue streams, put us into a position to then be able to raise a bigger round to do the pre-IPO round and actually IPO the business then, at the beginning of last year. So, I think that was a very stressful time, and it went from oh shit, we're effed to oh wow, this is actually a huge opportunity for the business, and now the business is over 10 times bigger than when we went into COVID. So ultimately, so far a very, very good story.
Now, just to wrap up, Justus, you're a serial entrepreneur, man with a lot of ideas from everything we're hearing so far. What's next?
Yeah, good question. I mean, so I really enjoy running Mad Paws at the moment. That's kind of what I signed up to, and I think there's still a lot of stuff we want to get done. We want to build a household brand in Australia in the pet space, and that still needs a lot of work. So we've got an amazing team now, not just here. We've got a team all around the world pretty much. We've got offices in Sydney, Melbourne, and Tweed Heads, and I think the focus for the next couple of years is going to be making Mad Paws the household brand that we believe it can be.
Well, I think there'll be plenty of happy cavoodles out there at that prospect, and plenty of happy cavoodle owners in Bondi and other parts of Australia too. Not to be specific about it. That's all we have time for today. Justus, thank you so much for joining us on First Act.
Thanks so much for having me.
For any more info on Mad Paws, head to madpaws.com.au. And thank you for joining us for another episode of First Act.